Gardeners of Greatness, this is Prof G, and by the end of this video, our game will be very much working. We'll track correct and incorrect words, we'll remove petals from the flower for incorrect guesses, we'll report when a word is guessed, or when guesses have all been used up, we'll add support for guessing multiple words, we'll enable a restart of the entire game, and we'll use the ternary operator along the way. Let's code! Now I noticed on the earlier video that even though I'd correctly shown in the slide that this label should be called Words in Game Label, I forgot to add the word label at the end of it. So since we're going to use this label in this video, let's go ahead and refactor this now. Remember, the right way to rename an IB outlet and to avoid an error is to right-click on the word you want to rename, then select Refactor, Rename, type the new name in, and press Return. We need values for an array of words to guess, and we want to keep track of which word in that array the user is guessing, so let's add those values now. These will be class properties. I'll put them right underneath the IB outlets, and the first one will be var words to guess equals, and this is an array of strings, so it's in square brackets, and the three strings inside will be Swift, dog, and cat. On the next line, we'll say var current word index equals 0, and we could go ahead and calculate the current word being guessed by using the words to guess in the current word index, but just to make things easier, we'll create a value that we'll call word to guess singular, and we'll initially set that to the empty string. Now we're about to configure our first word as underscores, but before we do that, why don't we go ahead and clear out what's in the word being revealed label on the main storyboard. We actually don't need to do that, but I think it's nice to have nothing in here except for the single underscore, so I'm going to highlight what's in the text field and just type an underscore over it. This way when we build and run, we can immediately take a look and see, oh yeah, there's not a single underscore in there. We can count up the letters. Hopefully we'll see everything is working fine. Now let's add the code. Back to viewcontroller.swift, and at the end of view.load, let's first set up our word to guess. So we'll say word to guess equals words to guess, and then in brackets current word index. And now that we have word to guess, let's set up our word being revealed label so that it has underscores for every letter inside of word to guess with a space in between the underscores, and we already wrote code for that. So we can head back over to our string manipulation playground, find this line here. Remember, this was one of the solutions to a challenge in the previous video. I'm going to grab this version that uses the repeated string of the space underscore, then just return to our view controller code and paste that in. And let's change this var repeating revealed word to the word being revealed label. I'll copy this label, paste it below, and add .text. Now let's build and run and take a look at how this looks. Our first word is Swift. We see an underscore for SWIFT. Perfect. Now we want to create the logic for what we do when we guess a letter. So let's create a function for that. We'll do that just before our IB actions. We'll say func guess a letter. We won't pass any values in here, so just open and close parens, open and close curlies. Then we actually guess a letter when we press the done key or when we press the guess a letter button. So we'll put the call to guess a letter as the very first line after done key pressed, and also as the first line in guess letter button pressed. Make sure both of these are called before the update UI after guess. And what do we want to do when the user guesses a letter? Well, we want to take that letter and we want to add it to a list of letters guessed. So let's create a class property and call that letters guessed. So up top we'll say var letters guessed. We'll set that equal to the empty string, and now we can use that down in guess a letter. So down in guess a letter, the first thing we should do is we should grab what the user typed into the guessed letter text field. Why don't we put that into a constant called current letter guessed. So we'll say let current letter guessed equals guessed letter text field dot text. And then on the next line, let's update this letters guessed that we just created above, initially the empty string, and we'll say that equals letters guessed, so whatever was in there previously, plus the last letter guessed, which was current letter guessed. Now we're getting an error in here. Can you guess why? The little red underscore in front of current letter guessed indicates that that's where the problem is, and that's because this is an optional string and we're trying to add it to the string of letters guessed. So we could solve this in lots of different ways. If you click the red error ball, we could perform either of the recommendations in the code fixes here, or we could address it up top. The reason why current letter guessed isn't optional is because the text property of guessed letter text field isn't optional. So we can also make sure that whatever we assign into current letter guessed is not going to be an optional. So one way to address this is we could use nil coalescing. Remember, that's 2 question marks. So if the stuff on the left-hand side of the 2 question marks is not nil, then we treat it as if it's forced unwrapped and not optional. But if that value on the left is nil, then what we put on the right-hand side of the 2 question marks is a default value to use, and an empty string would make sense. If we do this, we see that Xcode removes the error. We also mentioned that it's perfectly fine to force unwrap any text property of a label or a field as long as our app has created and initialized it, and that's the case with a guest letter text field. So why don't we just do that? I'll delete this null coalescing bit, the 2 question marks and the empty string. We'll put an exclamation point after the text, and now if I option click on current letter guest, I can see that that's a string, not an optional string, no question mark, and letter guest is also a string. We made sure that we're adding string to string instead of string to string optional, which Swift wouldn't let us do. Nice. And let's liberally comment this app. So I'll add a comment up top that says get current letter guest and add it to all letters guest. And I'll also add a comment below for what we're about to do, which is format and show revealed word in the word being revealed label so that that word being revealed label now includes our new guess. Now we also wrote the code to do this. This was the last challenge that we had in the previous video. So let's head back to our playground and we'll grab this whole text here. Remember when we were guessing words, the last word we guessed was Star Wars, and the code that we're going to need is what I've highlighted here. So right from where we say revealed word equals the empty string, all the way down through revealed word dot removed last. Once you've highlighted all of this, just copy that with a Command C. We'll head back into our code. We'll paste it below the comment that we just wrote. The errors tell us what we've got to change, so we haven't defined revealed word. So let's go ahead and declare that as a variable with a var out front. And in just a bit, all of our errors will go away. And then after we remove the last character in revealed word, let's take that and assign that to word being revealed label. So we'll say word being revealed label.text equals revealed word. We'll build and run, and let's see if we get some gameplay. And here we go. Remember, our first word is Swift. We type in S. We see it shows up. What if we type in Q? There is no Q. What about F? It is revealed in its proper place. T, looking good. Y, there is no Y. Nice. Now let's head back into our code and change our flowers if we guess incorrectly. But before we do that, let's go ahead and refactor because we're getting a lot of code inside of our guess a letter function. And we could leave all the code in here, but sometimes it's nice to break out chunks of code that are related into separate helper functions. This way it makes it easier to read through our code and figure out what's going on. That should also help you find things quickly, so it's easier to maintain your code too. And so why don't we do that for all of this code that I've highlighted right here? That's all the code to format and reveal a word. So I'm going to highlight that. I'm going to cut it out with a Command X. And then just above guess a letter, I'm going to create a new function, func, format revealed word. Open and close parens, because we're not passing anything in, open and close curlies. I'll paste in what we just cut out. And then down below here in guess a letter, I'll just call format revealed word. Again, makes the code a lot easier to read and hopefully find exactly the section that you want to work with. Now in terms of changing the flowers, remember our flowers are numbered from flower 8 to flower 0, which is the wilted flower with no petals on it. We can see those over in the assets catalog if we take a look. And in order to show the right petals, let's create a constant and variable up top. So let's create a constant first for the maximum number of wrong guesses. So we'll say let max number of wrong guesses, and we'll set that equal to 8. Now instead of creating the constant, we could have hard-coded the number 8 in any line where we needed that number below. But again, it's better practice to create constants for these kinds of things, because if you want to come back in here, put in different images with a different number of guesses, maybe flowers with more or less petals in them, you'll just have to make the change in one place. And then down below that, we'll start out with var wrong guesses remaining equals 8. So that's how many guesses we have. Each time we start the game, you've got 8 guesses because there are 8 petals on the flower. Then down here in guess a letter, after we formatted our revealed word, we'll put in a comment to say what we're about to do, update image if needed, and keep track of the wrong guesses. And we're going to change the image if we've made a wrong guess. How do we know if we've got a wrong guess? We can just check to see if the word to guess contains the current letter guessed. And we learned how to do that in the last video. We can say if word to guess dot contains, and then in parentheses, current letter guessed. And now if this is true, then the user has guessed correctly. So we don't care about that. If they guess correctly, no change to the flower. But if they guess incorrectly, then we need to update our image. What we want to do is we want to find if it's false, if the user has not guessed correctly. So we could say equals equals false at the end and add in our open and close curlies. Or what you could also do is you could put the not character in front of word to guess. So that's just the exclamation point. Remember, exclamation point in the front is not, on the back it's force unwrapped. So if we add the not character, what we're saying essentially, if it's not true that word.guess contains current letter guessed. So if we do this, we have to get rid of the equal equal false at the end. But I actually think it's easier to read the other way. Sometimes it's easy to overlook the not character in the front. So instead, why don't we go ahead and have equals equals false at the end, and we'll get rid of the not character in the beginning. If you find yourself faced with a choice of economy of code versus readability of code, it's best to opt for readability. So what are we going to do if the user guessed incorrectly? Well, first we're going to delete 1 from the number of wrong guesses. So wrong guesses remaining equals wrong guesses remaining minus 1. And then we're going to set the image for the flower image for the number of wrong guesses remaining. So we'll say flower image view dot image equals UI image. Remember, the named option is what we want down in here. And then our name is going to be the string flower, since all those images are named flower, but then string interp, and we'll put wrong guesses remaining inside of this. And this should work fine. Now let's build and run and see how this looks. First we'll type in an S, and there's no petal being removed because S is a correct guess. What if we type in an X? Oh, we've lost a petal because that's an incorrect guess. Guess an X again. Oh, another petal is gone from the flower. Third incorrect guess, 3 petals gone. Put in an F, no petal loss at all. F shows up properly. T looks good. W looks good. But there is no O. Now we'll eventually put in a simple animation to make it seem like the leaves are turning brown, and we'll add some sounds too, but for the rest of this video, let's get some of the basic mechanics of gameplay down, and then we'll work on the polish later. So to continue, we've got a bunch of labels up top that show the status of the game. Words guessed, words missed, words remaining, words in game. Let's get those updating properly. And sometimes when you're building an app, it helps to actually break out a pad and a piece of paper, draw out the interface, how the interface is going to change, what kind of variables or other values you're going to need in order to be able to make those changes. And so that's sort of what I've done on this slide. So here are our labels up top. We also have this game status label down here, which currently says you've made 5 guesses. And in order to make all of these things change the way we want, we're going to need to create 3 class properties. So a words guessed count, a words missed count, and the guess count is the number of guesses that you've currently made for that word. Now up here in the upper left, we're going to have our word guessed count equal the word guessed count. We're going to have the word missed count equal the word missed count. We've got the words in game, which is just going to be the words to guess dot count. And for our words to guess in the upper right hand corner, we're just going to calculate that as words to guess dot count minus words guessed count plus words missed count. Let's code that. So up top, let's add these 3 class properties. Var words guessed count equals 0, var words missed count equals 0, and var guess count equals 0. Now down in our getAletter function, let's go ahead and first code the game status message label. We'll update this each time the user makes a guess, let them know how many guesses they've made. We'll also update it after they're done guessing the word to let them know if they guessed the word right or if they missed. So we'll put in a comment that says update game status message label. And on the next line, we'll say guess count plus equals 1. That's the same as guess count equals guess count plus 1. And then under that, we'll say game status message label dot text equals you've made string interp guess count guesses. Let's build and run and see how it looks. Now I'm going to type in an incorrect guess right from the start, and we see something that we want to change. It says you've made 1 guesses. I think we want to make the 1 guess as the singular instead of 1 guesses. We'll do that next, but let's enter some more guesses here. So next I'll guess S. Watch what happens when we click guess a letter. We go from you've made 1 guesses to you've made 2 guesses. That's updating. We'll try 3, 4, 5, 6 guesses, and regardless of whether we make a correct guess or an incorrect guess, we are properly tabulating the guesses. Good. Back in our code, let's deal with the singular and plural issue that we just pointed out. So just after where we increment guess count by 1, we'll create a new variable, var guesses, and we'll set this equal to the string of the plural value guesses. But then underneath we'll say if guess count equals 1, open and close curlies, and inside we'll set guesses equal to just guess. Then we can go where we update the text property of the game status message label down below, and we'll change the string literal guesses to string interp with the variable guesses inside. Now this works perfectly if we build and run. The app first loads, we see you've made 0 guesses shows up first. That's just the default text that we put in this label on the main storyboard. And you know what? I see one other thing that we want to change. So we didn't put a period in the default text, but we did put a period into our code. So we'll get rid of the period after this. So let's make 1 guess. It says you've made 1 guess singular. Nice. But subsequent guesses are indeed listed as guesses, plural. So singular and plural is solved. But I want to show you a technique where we could use only 1 line of code in order to be able to set guess or guesses for plurality. First, let's get rid of the period we were putting at the end of the game status message label just to make it consistent with the default text that was on the main storyboard. And now let's head over to the slides to take a look at the ternary operator. So the ternary operator lets us write an if-else condition in a single line of code. So this is in contrast with the standard if statement that has a bool expression evaluate this first set of curlies if it's true, or the else set of curlies if it's false, we simply put the expression first, and that's evaluated as true or false, and then we follow the expression with a question mark. Now we follow the question mark with the results that we'll use if the expression is true, following that with a colon, followed by the results we'll use if the expression is false. So again, we look at the stuff before the question mark first. It's going to be either true or false. It has to be a Boolean expression. If it's true, we do what's after the question mark. If it's false, we do what's after the colon. Now, you'd only want to use this if you had really short values that you were setting, depending on whether it was true or false. But that's exactly what we have here, guess or guesses. So we could take a whole block of code like the one we have here. We actually wrote ours a little bit more efficiently since we skipped the else clause and just defined guesses with the string guesses. But by using this expression up here, we're only using a single line of code. Now again, you might think this is harder to read, so you might decide you want to use more statements for readability. Ultimately, it's up to you. But do know the ternary operator. You'll definitely encounter this in your career, just like the not operator. And just to make sure that we know how to use this, let's go ahead and modify our code, and we'll use the ternary operator as a replacement for the if statement we just wrote. So back in our code, we can highlight these 4 lines here, comment them out with a command slash, then we'll write our single statement, var guesses equals. Now we don't need parentheses around the statement, but I like to include them. Again, it makes it easier to read, it makes it very clear that this whole thing inside the parentheses is to be evaluated as a single statement. So then we can first put in our Boolean expression, that's guess count equals 1, that's evaluated as either true or false, and then I'll put in question mark and colon. After the question mark is the result if the expression is true, that's going to be the singular string guess. After the colon would be the result that we'll use if the expression is false, and that'll be the plural string guesses. Now Xcode reminds us that this doesn't need to be a variable, we can change it to a constant. That's actually what we had on the previous slide, so let's change var to let. We'll build and run. I'll speed this up. It works just like it did before. Starts out with you made 0 guesses. We'll make 1 guess. It says you made 1 guess, singular. We'll make more guesses, and they all say guesses the plural. But we gave an example of how we could use the ternary operator to use less code. Nice. Now, sometimes before you code, it's really useful to write out in natural language what you're about to do. And so that's what I'll do here in the comments. This will also serve as a guide to make sure that we've completed all of our steps. So what we're about to do is, after each guess, we're going to check to see if 2 things happen. 1, the user won the game. How do we know this happened? Well, all letters have been guessed, so there should be no more underscores in word being revealed.text. That's what we'll check. Then we'll do everything we need to handle game over. Now the second thing that might happen is the user may have lost the game. How do we know they lost the game? Well, the wrong guesses remaining equals 0, and then we'll handle again, game over. Now if neither of these 2 things happen, which means it's just a regular guess, then we'll continue to play, no updates necessary. So let's code these conditions in Swift below. First, we know the user won the game if there are no underscores in wordbeingrevealed.text. So we'll say if wordbeingrevealed.text.contains, and then we'll pass in underscore equals false, open and close curlies, no underscore in the word being revealed. That means they've won the game. Xcode gives us an error in here that's related to the fact that text is an optional, so we can just go ahead and force unwrap that with an exclamation point. Then for now, for handling game over, why don't we just go ahead and update game status message label.text, and we'll say that that equals, how about, you've guessed it. It took you string interp, guess count, guesses to guess the word, and then let's increment word guess count by 1. So we'll say word guessed count plus equals 1. Otherwise, let's check to see if the user lost the game. So we'll say after the curly, else if wrong guesses remaining equals 0, open and close curlies. We'll set up the game status message label.text here as well, and in this one we'll say, so sorry, you're all out of guesses. And if this happens, let's make sure that we increment the words missed count by 1, so we'll say words missed count plus equals 1. Let's build and run and see how things look. No errors, hammer time. Here's our app. I'll just guess a bunch of answers wrong all the way up to the end, up until here's our moment of truth. We got 1 leaf left. What happens if we guess a wrong letter? Whoa, so sorry, you're all out of guesses. Now we haven't updated these 4 game labels up top. We'll want to make sure that we do that. We also want to make sure that we show the play again button and do everything necessary to reset the interface and reset any counters so that we can start to guess another word. We want to increment to the next word. So let's return to the project and code that up. Now, after we win or lose the game, we've got a few things that we need to accomplish, and we need to do those regardless of whether we win or lose. So we'll create a new func, update after win or lose, open and close parens, we won't pass anything in, open and close curlies, and now let's call this in two places, after a win or after a loss. Now we record a win down here and guess a letter, just after we increment word guessed count +1, so we'll call it there. Update after win or lose, and then just below that we know we've recorded a loss with word miscount +1, so again we'll call it update after win or lose. And now that we put in all our code, I'm going to cut out all these comments and I'll put in a simpler comment, check for win or lose. Well, now up here in update after win or lose, let's write in some comments to show what we're about to code up. So what do we do if the game is over? Well, we're going to increment current word index by 1. We're going to disable the guess a letter text field. We're going to disable the guess a letter button, because again, the user shouldn't be guessing any letters if they've just lost the game. They've got to indicate if they want to play again. And if they want to play again, what we've got to do is we've got to show our play again button. So we'll set play again button is hidden to false. And we'll also update all those labels at the top of the screen. And whoops, I spelled increment wrong, but it doesn't matter. What we do down here to increment is we'll say current word index plus equals 1. Then we disable interface elements by setting the isEnabled property to false. So we'll say guess letter text field dot isEnabled equals false, and guess letter button dot isEnabled equals false. Now in order to make the play again button visible, that's the isHidden property. That was initially set to true. So what we want to do is we want to set the play again button dot isHidden property equal to false. Then let's update the labels at the top of the screen. So we'll put in a comment that says update labels at top of screen, and we showed how to update these labels on a previous slide. So we'll say word guessed label.text equals, and then the string word guessed colon string interp words guessed count, then words missed label.text equals, and the string words missed colon string interp words missed count, words remaining label.text equals, and then the string words to guess, and then in the string interp, we'll do a calculation. We'll say words to guess dot count minus, and then in parentheses, we're going to subtract words guessed count plus words missed count. Then down below that, words in game dot text equals the string words in game colon string interp words to guess dot count. Now let's refactor here. So these 4 lines that update the game status labels, why don't we cut those out? We'll create a new function, and we'll do that just below this function. So we'll say func update game status labels, then we'll paste those lines in there. Now we'll call this function from the spot in update after win or lose where we just cut these lines out. So we'll say update game status labels. But the reason why this really makes sense to break out as a function is we also need to update the game status labels at the end of viewDidLoad. So I'll highlight the call to the function update game status labels, copy it, so we'll paste it in just before the close curly and viewDidLoad. We'll build and run. Let's see how things look. Our 4 labels up top are perfectly updated right from the call and viewDidLoad. Nice. I'm going to quickly put in a bunch of guesses so that I guess wrong, and then right down here before the moment of truth, we go from one pedal to play again. So sorry, you're all out of guesses. The play again button is showing. Now the bulk of the work that we did since our last build is on the labels up top. So we can see we just recorded a new words missed. So we've got a 1 in there. Also our words to guess have been decremented. So now we've only got 2 more to guess out of a total words in game of 3. Now nothing happens when we click on play again, but when we think about what's going to happen then, well, we're going to want to hide the play again button. We're going to want to reset the image so that it shows flower 8. We're going to want to reset the wrong guesses remaining. We're going to want to increment the current word index and move on to the next word to guess. We're going to need to reset the word being revealed. We're going to have to clear out the letters guessed, and you're going to have to enable the text field. So hopefully this side-by-side gives you a sense of what we need to do. There's a lot to do. Let's implement this, and then we'll be done with a significant portion of the game mechanics for gameplay. So all right, we've got a lot of work to do. It's going to be down here in the play again button pressed. Again, we can set this up with a bunch of things in comments to remind us what to do. So we need to hide the play again button. We need to enable the letter guessed text field. We need to disable the guess a letter button. It already is though. We need to set the current word so that it's the next word. We need to set the word being revealed.text to underscore separated by spaces. We need to set the wrong guesses remaining to the maximum number of wrong guesses. We need to set the guess count equal to 0, set the flower image equal to flower 8, clear out the letters guessed so that the new word starts with no letters guessed, so that's the empty string. And we need to reset the get status message label so that it says you've made 0 guesses. So let's do it. Play again button dot is hidden equals true. Guess letter text field dot is enabled also equals true. Guess letter button dot is enabled equals false. The reason for that is we don't want to turn it true until there's actually a character in the text field. Then let's get the next word to guess. That's word to guess equals words to guess, and in brackets, current word index. Now remember, we updated current word index up here in update after win or lose, so we're okay. We don't need to go ahead and increment that again. Then back down and play again button pressed, we'll set wrong guesses remaining equal to max number of wrong guesses. Then to note this next code, I'll put in a comment. Rate the word with underscores, one for each space, and we've already got the code for this. It's up in view did load. And just grab this line of code highlighted here, copy it, Command C, and head back down, paste it right in at the end of play button pressed. We'll set guess count equal to 0, flower image view dot image equal to UI image named, and then that'll be the string flower, but with string interp, max number of wrong guesses. We'll set letters guessed equal to the empty string, and game status message label dot text equal to you've made 0 guesses. So I think we've got everything in our play again button pressed, so let's go ahead and build and run. And I'm going to advance us through gameplay really quickly. And now pay attention to when we only have one petal left. I'm about to click on guess a letter and get it wrong. So look up top, we currently have words missed 0 and words to guess 3. Let's see what happens when we guess a letter and it's the wrong letter and we lose the game. Now we've got words missed 1, words in game 2. What happens when we click on play again? And look at that, full reset. So it now says you've made 0 guesses. We see the fresh as a daisy flower 8. We see a new word with 3 blank spaces in there. I think I know what this letter is. I'll type in D, I'll type in O. Just before we guess the letter correctly, look, we got words guessed equals 0 and words to guessed equals 2. We'll guess the letter G. And we get the message that says, you guessed it, it took 4 guesses to guess the word. We see that we now have a word guessed 1. We also see that we've decremented the words to guess by 1, so there's only 1 left. Now I'll click on play again, and I'll zoom through this really quickly, CAT. Now watch what happens when I click on play again. Oh, we crashed with an index out of range. That's because we've gone through all the words in our words to guess array, and when we try to increase our current word by 1 and then use that in the array, iOS says, no, you don't have any element at that index number. So what should we do? Well, we should probably tell the user that they're done playing all of the words and that they have the option to completely reset the game from the beginning. Let's finish this up. First, at the end of guess a letter, after we've determined if the user has guessed correctly or incorrectly, we'll put in a comment that says, check to see if you played all the words. If so, update the message indicating that the player can restart the entire game. And the way that we can do that is we can say if current word index equals word to guess dot count. And then in between the curlies, we'll say game status message label dot text exclamation point plus equals, because we'll add this to the end of the current status. And we'll put in 2 line feeds, \n, and we'll say, you've tried all of the words, exclamation point, restart from the beginning. Now we can still handle that logic in our play again button pressed. So let's go down there, and we can get rid of all these comments since we've already put in all of this code, but I'll put a new comment up front that says, if all words have been guessed and you've selected play again, then restart all games as if the app had been restarted. And the way that we'll check that is we'll say if current word index equals word to guess dot count, and in between the 2 curlies, we'll say, all right, we got to reset our current word index, so current word index equals 0. We'll set words guessed count equal to 0, and words missed count equals to 0. I need to make sure that I say equal instead of minus up here. Words guessed count equals 0. And then right at the end of this function, let's make sure that we call update game status labels. It shouldn't really matter where you call this as long as you call it below the if statement. Now let's build and run and see if we can completely restart our game. I'll speed the video through this. So I guessed Swift, I missed dog, here I am at cat, I've got C-A. What happens when I guess that last letter T and finish all of my words? Here we go, moment of truth. Click that letter and ho! We see our words guessed are 2, our words missed are 1. We have no more words to guess, but we see our message down here. We have in our status that says you've guessed it. It took you 4 guesses to guess the word. Then our 2 line feeds with those /n's we've appended. You've tried all the words. Restart from the beginning. Let's see what happens now when we click on play again. Before it gave us index out of range, did we fix our problem? And ho-ho! Look at this. We completely reset everything. Fresh as a daisy. Up top we see words to guess 3, words in game 3, words guessed 0, words missed 0. You can keep playing, but swifter. We've got the basics of the game mechanics down. In the next video, what we'll do is we'll play some sounds and we'll introduce some really basic animation. So it makes it look like the petals are turning brown just before they're removed from the flower. Keep at it, Swifter, and feel good about your skills.